Next up in this Photoshop lesson, we will use our blurred background. We will open an image that we took from the first day of class. We'll resize that image, and then we're going to place that image within this landscape or this background. And then after we do that, we're going to use the eraser tool to remove parts of the images from the first day that we don't want and reveal the background layers that we have here in front of us. So, step number one is bring up one of those blurred images that you created in the previous lesson. And once you've done that, the next thing you will do is open one of those images that you cropped in the previous lessons. And once again, I think I'll go back to, let's see, let's go with Saul here. Now this one obviously hasn't been cropped, so I'll just go ahead and do that real quickly. There we go. Click that check mark. And there it is. And then I will go ahead and save it. And so that's a quick review of what we did in our earlier Photoshop lessons. Next, I'm going to float these images. There's one. And we'll just stick with that one for now and go ahead and learn how to resize this before we do that float on the other image. So I've got Saul out here, and so I want to resize him. This image is still pretty large even after a crop. And so here's how you do it. Image. Image size. And I'll repeat that for you. To resize this image that I have floating out here. It had been sitting up here. We could do it with it right there. But I'm going to go ahead and drag it out to the workspace. Image. Image size. And then you want to take a look at this section right here, width and height. We will go ahead and leave constrained proportions selected. And for this image, let's go ahead and change the width to 1000. And then click OK. And we'll let the height adjust itself automatically at this point. And there we go. So see if you can get to the point where you have an image here, resized, and then a blurred background. And for now, let's go ahead and leave this image anchored to this taskbar. Now next up, we will need the Move tool. And here's a good reason why it's called the Move tool, because we are going to move one image on top of the other image. So we're going to take Saul and we're going to move him into this background. So it's a magic move. It's a little tricky. So pay attention, watch, and then you'll get a lot of practice. First of all, let me show you how not to do it. Do not grab this top banner here and do that. That is just simply taking one picture and placing it somewhere else within our workspace here. We want to actually grab this image and drag it right on top here. And you'll notice right now that we just have a single background and that this image is just a single background. So with that Move tool selected, or you can press the letter V, I'm going to click within the image and carefully drag and release. And leave it about like that. Give that a try. I'll do it again. Move tool. Click on the image and drag it into the background. Now once you've done that, make sure that Show Transform Controls is selected. If it's off, you won't see these little resize handles located around the image. When it's on, there they are. Now you got to be real careful with these, because we're going to resize this image using these handles. But it's very important to maintain the ratio of width and height by pressing the Shift key on your computer. So you have to hold down that Shift key and grab one of these corners, and then you can resize that image. If you don't use the Shift key, you get this kind of effect here, which is not what we want. See that? That allows us to freeform the picture. Now there might be times when you do want to do that with an image, but this is not one of those times. So I'm going to click the not sign to undo all of that. Hold the Shift key down, resize that picture to something that fits into this background just a little bit better, and set him right down there. And I do want to anchor that down to the bottom because our picture ends here, and so the effect would be just a little bit odd to have him kind of just sitting out in the middle of that landscape. And once again, I kind of want to use my rule of thirds. I'm going to focus on my lower left third here. And so I'm going to place him. And then again, you can resize a little bit if you want. Get it where you want. And once you have that size just about where you want it, I'm going to go ahead and go for something pretty large here. So I'll go for that upper third, I think. And then click the check mark to accept that change. And now notice, you have the background layer and layer number 1. We can take that and put it back on the taskbar. And then we're working with just this image here. So I'd recommend you pause the video and try to get to this point before we move on to the eraser tool. Up next, using the eraser tool to remove portions of the background that we do not want and keeping that which we do. So it's going to take some practice. It's a little bit tricky, real easy to make mistakes. So at this point, what I would recommend that you do, because we now have this 2-layered image, let's go ahead and I'm going to put the original soul away. Don't need that anymore. And I'm not going to save those changes. But I am going to duplicate this new image that I have that consists of 2 layers. That way, when I make mistakes, and notice I said when I make mistakes, I can go back to a clean version. Right now they're exactly the same, but I'm going to keep that clean version open in case I need to go back to it, discard all of my changes. And so you are going to do a lot of practice, so plan on making a lot of mistakes, trying out, experimenting with different ways to use this eraser tool. Don't try to make the best image you can possibly make during your first attempt. It won't happen. And we don't want to do that. That would take a long time. We want you to get in there and get the picture a little bit dirty. Play around. So, the eraser tool, once again, over here on the toolbar, it looks like the classic school eraser. Right-click and make sure you click on the eraser tool. We'll use these other types of erasers later. You can do some experimenting with those a bit later. But right now, we're going to get that eraser tool. And once again, to adjust the size of that brush, is that we click up here. Right now it's size 13. We want to make that a little bit larger. I think we were using something around 300 before. That's a little too big. And then let's talk about the hardness here. And here's how hardness works. If you have that brush set at 100%, when you erase something, it's going to look like that. It's got some real hard edges here. Let me make my brush a little smaller so we can do some comparisons here. So there's a real hard brush. If I take and I make that brush a little bit softer, let's go halfway, and then you can see it's looking more like this kind of spray paint effect. If I do that even more, and let's say take it down to 0, so it's just completely soft, and then you're going to see that real light touch there, like an airbrush. So there's a very hard brush, medium brush, and a very, very soft brush. So experiment with those, and then we will come back and do a little bit more with that brush. All right, I've kept my eraser at a very soft brush, and I'm going to make it large. And so at a size of about 400, hardness of 0. And now we're going to take a look at the third option that we like to use with this brush, and that is the opacity. And the opacity refers to how much material we remove with each click and stroke of this brush. So at 100%, it's going to do something like that. Remove a lot of material. If I take that down to about half, about 50%, it's going to remove 50% at a time. I can go even less. I just remove a little bit, and you can see it's starting to fade through there. So right now I'm at 15%. So each time I click the mouse, it's going to remove 15%. And eventually I can get to 100% by clicking a lot. And so you'll be using this tool quite a bit depending on where you are working within the image. So here's how it's going to go. Initially, I want to get rid of all of this material here to reveal the background. So likely I would take this thing way up close to 100% and probably make my brush a lot harder because I just want to get rid of stuff. This stuff that I don't want. And then I can resize that brush as I get closer to my subject. Keep that hard there. And resize. And so there we go. So I'm erasing all of this. Now I want to be careful that I don't make a mistake and do something like that. That is not what I want to do. And you will recall that it is possible to undo that change with Control-Z. And you can also come up here and click Edit Undo or Redo, depending on where you are with that command. So anyway, I'm going to come in here and just get rid of some of this stuff real quickly that I don't want. And this is, oops, got rid of that nice pen. I didn't want to do that. That's going to get a little tricky when we do this. I'm going to go in there and just shave that away. And then as you get closer, it's going to get a little trickier. But we have a little tool that helps us out. And it's called the Zoom tool. And the shortcut for the Zoom tool is the letter Z. So I'm going to press the Z, click, and so if I want to come in here and have a little more detail, you start to see the pixels. Then I can press the letter E, go back to my eraser, resize my brush, and then I can start erasing a little bit more. I think I hit that softness. I didn't mean to do that. I still want to keep that up there pretty high while I'm getting in close. Okay, now some of you might be hearing that little clicking and notice that I'm resizing that brush quite fast. And I'm doing that using these brackets on the keyboard, which you can't see. Let me see if I can turn the camera down there and you can see those brackets here. Here's your enter key. And here you have the brackets. So the right bracket makes the brush bigger, and the left bracket makes it smaller. And so that way you can adjust very quickly with the keyboard while you're making these changes. The brush got really large. And so the goal is to go in here and practice, and it is real challenging. And later on I'll show you some tools that make it even a little bit easier. But right now just go in there and see, just practice moving those brushes around and try to remove as much as you can without removing any of our subject. In this case being Saul. We don't want to remove his arms or any of that. And now to zoom out, go back to the Z, and up here you'll see a plus for zoom in and a minus for zoom out. So there, I'm zooming in. Here, I'm zooming out. Back to the E. And I'm going to continue with that and just try to remove as close as I can without doing that. Yikes. Remember, Control-Z, undo. So go on in there, bring up somebody, bring a picture of yourself up there if we have it, and then this is a little tricky here. See if we can keep the pen in the picture. Now, if you don't want the pen, you can, of course, get rid of the pen if you want to. So anyway, just practice scrubbing through there. And then, as you get close, and you want to remove some of this other material that's really close to the skin. You're going to zoom in. And then, to the eraser tool, size that brush using those brackets and come in there real close and try to get rid of those pixels. And then, as you get closer and closer, your final attempt will be to lower the opacity and lower the hardness so that you remove less material and it makes it a much more gradual change. See that? So I'm just keep clicking to remove a little bit at a time to smooth it out and try to blend it in. Like that. And then make that brush even smaller. And then when you zoom out, well, that starts to look kind of weird without having that pin in there. But there, that's pretty good. So from a distance, it looks pretty good. So bring up a picture, go in there, and practice. And I will come around and answer any questions you have. If at any point you need to replay this, just to look at it again, a lot of technical details. But once you get it, it'll become pretty second nature for you, and you will find that it is a lot of fun. Photoshop's magic program does a lot of stuff. The amount that I actually know about Photoshop is very little. There just seems to be no end to what can be done with this. So have a good time, and I will see you in the classroom.